Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of video games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is Joe DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games they come from without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is 2001's Silent Hill 2, one of the most beloved horror masterpieces in all of gaming, with a chilling atmosphere and a fantastic soundtrack to go alongside it.
Following that is 2015's The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, the grand adventure of a hunter of men and monsters trying to find his ward, all in the context of Poland's most famous media franchise. So, I think it would be probably pretty easy to just say monsters for a theme, whether they're real from another dimension or they're all part of this crazy town, or you could say like delayed sex or lack thereof. I don't know.
I put that theme down as a joke on the outline and then kept thinking like, yeah, but it makes sense though.
It's kind of true. Because monsters may just be a cop-out. Like, many games can have monsters, so we gotta throw something in there. Joe, how are you doing on spooky October?
I am doing pretty alright. I started Link's Awakening a couple days ago. It's doing pretty good. Having a good time with that. Still doing my streams over at NWR for October. Did Detention last week. I really should talk about that game one of these days because, wow, it was really good. And I'm doing Little Nightmares this week. At time, like the day this comes out, I'm doing Little Nightmares tonight. So head on over to the Twitch if you are listening on release day. Probably not.
Very exciting, though. At least check the archive on Twitch. And I apologize. Like, I am not well this week. Pretty under the weather with coughing and just hacking my lung sound, stuff like that. So I apologize if I'm not up to the usual standards. So let's talk about our different composers that we've talked about on the past episodes here. We like to still follow what they end up doing in the industry because they're busy, they're working. And so sometimes news headlines pop up and we'll talk about our composer follow-up headlines. Let's start with John Wick Hex, which is this prequel game to the John Wick film series. It's a strategy game. The game's from Mike Bithell, who is the creator of Thomas Was Alone, you may remember, but the music composed by Austin Wintory, so good stuff there.
We also got news of Masakazu Sugimori, who is doing the music for the game Murder by Numbers, which is an Ace Attorney-like game that features Picross elements, which sounds incredible, and I'm very excited for it.
You just look at that game, and it's totally Ace Attorney right up the alley, and you hear the music, it sounds like it's an Ace Attorney. Then they do the splash screen. Oh, I'm amazed that they got Sugimori. That's fantastic. We have a couple new songs from composers we've covered in the past, so we'll play samples of them here for you. Recently from the Hades soundtrack with Darren Korb and Ashley Barrett singing. This is Good Riddance.
It's a cool duet between Orpheus and Eurydice, and it's good.
Yeah, it's great to hear this one, and just the two of them pairing up together once again, spot on.
A new Lotus Juice song also came out called Stab the Sword of Justice. It is from Persona 5 The Royal Cross Star Ocean Anamnesis, which is I don't know much about the Star Ocean franchise, except that it crosses over with everything.
I'm not even sure if this is like a mobile game or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but like Lotus Juice, Persona 5, we're gonna mention it still. I do know that I saw him tweet yesterday, because Japan at time of recording is going through a typhoon right now. And I saw him tweet, hey, if you're in Japan, stay off the streets and just play some Star Ocean with me. I was like, oh, and then I read the outline. I was like, oh, that's why.
Yeah, that would be why. And I think the song is supposed to represent Kasumi. So that's pretty cool.
That makes sense.
And finally, Mega Man Universe. The name of that game may not be familiar to some people, but it was a canceled game from 2010. It was like Mario Maker before Mario Maker, but for Mega Man. And it infamously got canceled along with Mega Man Legends 3. But several tracks from that game were leaked on the internet. We don't know who the composers are, but we just thought that was really interesting because a lot of them were remixes from Mega Man 2.
So I figured we'd talked about Mega Man enough that, might as well bring it up. I mean, Matsumaya was last week.
Yeah. So maybe one of them was kind of in a catch-all there. So those are really the big headlines from the past week. Quite several of them. But, good to always, represent certain songs when they drop singular releases, kind of teasing their future projects. Really cool.
But it's time for the reason for the season. Let's talk about Silent Hill 2. Do you have any idea how long I've waited to talk about this game? I was actually going to talk about this game next week, but then a game got announced and I needed to slot another game in there, so this got pushed back. It feels a little weird talking about Silent Hill so early in the season, but also it gets me to talk about Silent Hill.
It's still October. It's still Halloween season. It's all good.
And what better game to talk about? So, the original Silent Hill was released for the PlayStation in 1999, and it was developed by Konami's Team Silent. And this was Konami's attempt at answering the success of Capcom's Resident Evil. As far as I can tell, they will never tell you that. But it started development in 1996, which is the year Resident Evil came out. So, put two and two together, it was a huge success, the original Silent Hill. So, of course, immediately upon releasing it and seeing how much money they had raked in, Konami began production on a sequel. Silent Hill 2 was released for the PlayStation 2 on September 24th, 2001, followed by an Xbox release in December of 2001 and a PC release in December of 2002. It is a survival horror/adventure game that sees the player take control of James Sunderland, who has received a letter from his wife, Mary, telling him that she is waiting for him in their special place in the town of Silent Hill. It's just one problem with that. Mary is dead and has been dead for 3 years, died of a disease, an unspecified disease as far as I remember. I believe James describes it as that damn disease, and that's all the detail you get. But the point is, she's dead, and she shouldn't be sending letters. That's kind of weird. So to find out where the letter came from and who could have possibly sent it, James travels to Silent Hill, only to find it much different from the town he once visited. While in town, he meets characters like Angela, who is a teenager who has run away looking for her mother, another teenage runaway named Eddie, who seems to be running away from something.
He's creepy.
He's very creepy. And Laura, an 8-year-old girl who claims to have been friends with Mary in the hospital. Fun fact, Angela is voiced by Donna Burke.
Oh.
Which I did not know until doing research for this. If you don't know who Donna Burke is, she would go on to sing Sins of the Father and Heavens Divide in Metal Gear.
Yeah, famous Metal Gear Solid vocalist.
Yeah, so that's kind of amazing. He also, most importantly, meets Maria, a very, sort of, shall we say, sexually aggressive lady who happens to look and sound exactly like Mary. As for the town itself, I don't think I can actually put it any better than Angela actually puts it, so I'm just going to let her describe it.
This town, there's something wrong with it.
Yeah, It's about right. Silent Hill is a decrepit and filthy town devoid of people. It is covered in a dense fog. And also, there are a lot of monsters there, including possibly the most famous horror monster in all of video games, Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head has unfortunately, and I know that sounds weird that I'm describing this as unfortunately, become a mainstay in the franchise and effectively the mascot of Silent Hill. And the reason I say unfortunately is because Pyramid Head is actually supposed to be specific to James Sunderland.
Yeah.
So anywhere else he shows up is wrong. He should not be in any, especially in other Silent Hill media, he should not be there.
I feel like even if people haven't seen, like they can't picture what Pyramid Head is, if you see Pyramid Head, you've probably seen that character before.
Yeah, he's just this sort of man wearing a smock with a giant metal pyramid on his head. It's exactly what he sounds like. And usually he's carrying a giant butcher knife. He's creepy. I love him. The first time you see him, he's not doing anything. Like, the first time you see Pyramid Head, he's just standing on the other side of some bars staring at you. He can't get to you. You can't get to him, but he's just there. And it's fantastic. And then, of course, later you get the scene, which is the one most people remember. And so James must solve the mystery of who sent him this letter and why. And also, why is Maria so similar to his wife? And what's the special place? And why has the town brought him here? And also, what's with all the monsters? That's probably a very important question as well. So, this is the part where I ask, what are our experiences with Silent Hill 2?
So, I am not a fan of horror games like you are. So, I own Silent Hill 2. I've just never played Silent Hill 2. The thing I know about Silent Hill 2 is actually this soundtrack is a big standout on Pandora's video game music radio channel. And so many songs from that soundtrack have shown up. Several years ago, that was a mainstay listen for me. So songs like from the Gears of War soundtrack would pop up on there, but this soundtrack was all over the place. And so, yeah, I feel like I know enough about Silent Hill 2. It's kind of one of those games we talk about, like BioShock and things like that, that once you start to kind of ingratiate yourself in video games and the industry and news and its history and learning about past titles, Silent Hill 2 is one of those ones that, like, you're gonna come across, spoilers for it, the big twist, things like that. So it's not one that you can, that easily avoid, I suppose. So I know these things about it, but I've never played it, none of that. But I feel like I know several of the songs on the soundtrack quite well.
Yeah, it's one of those games that some of my research led me to people, and I agree with these people actually, saying like, if there was a Criterion collection for video games, like Silent Hill 2 is one of the first games on that collection, 100%, like with a bullet. And I agree with that. I think that this game is a masterpiece, and I got to play it on original hardware, which is a miracle, considering reasons that we will get into later. Believe you me, but my roommate owned a copy on PlayStation 2, so I got to play it that way. And I'm eternally grateful for that. So, let's get into the development of Silent Hill 2, because this game's got some fun stories along with it, and then we're gonna get real sad after that. As stated before, Silent Hill 2 began development right as the first game was completed and released, so it began development in 1999. And Team Silent was once again put onto the project, with the story initially apparently being based on the Russian novel Crime and Punishment.
What?
So that's interesting. The development team for the game was reportedly made up of about 50 people, with 20 of them having been the original game's creative team, and the rest being people brought in from Konami Computer Entertainment Tokyo. According to Team Silent, the decision to make a sequel was done for two reasons. One, the first game had done very well, and Konami wanted more of that money. Things haven't changed that much. Konami just wanted a payout.
Mm-hmm.
But two, they had actually hit a lot of technical snags working with the original PlayStation during development of the first game, and they wanted to see what they would be able to do on next-gen consoles, because those were starting to become a thing. Which leads us into why the PlayStation 2. And that apparently was made because they didn't actually have a very long amount of time to decide on a platform. And the PlayStation 2 was the only one at that time with actual details revealed about it. The GameCube and Xbox had not actually been fully announced yet. They were just, it was in that phase of, we're making it, it's coming. But they didn't have names, there were no dev kits, things like that. So they didn't actually know anything about those systems, which leads me to think, is there an AU somewhere where it came out on the GameCube?
Yeah, you'd think it would just be, sequel loyalty. It was on the original PlayStation. It has to be on PlayStation 2. That's really interesting.
Apparently, this was also because Konami's business section was like, the PS2 is going to be the main focus of the market. Put it on the PS2. Do it. Do it.
And they're not wrong.
They were very right to put it on that system. Obviously, this kind of changed after a bit because development on the Xbox version of the game started alongside it, because both of them were shown when the game was unveiled during Tokyo Game Show in 2001.
I did not know that there was even Silent Hill 2 on Xbox.
Me neither. I didn't know that until I did the research for this. I thought it was a PlayStation 2 exclusive that happened to get a PC release. So this was news to me, but apparently it did come out on Xbox. I feel like that's not an uncommon thing to have forgotten, though. Since the team already had a pretty good idea of the type of setting, because, they were just bringing it over from the first game. They knew that they were working with a small town in America. This let them sit down and focus on the plot before they had to focus on the setting. Whereas in the first game, they had to focus on both at the same time. And so they were able to flesh out the plot a lot more before they actually started working the game. And also the visual style of the game, with the ability to do more things on the PS2 than they were able to do on the PS1. For instance, the fog of Silent Hill. In the original game, that was just a way to cover up render distances.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've ever seen the first Silent Hill. The fog doesn't look great because, it's a PlayStation 1 game.
I actually did play through the first Silent Hill. We used a guide for the whole time because that game is obtuse as hell.
Boy, is it.
But, it was a game.
I think that game holds up relatively well, other than the obtuse puzzles, obviously, because, that's just how games were then. They kind of still are sometimes. But I think overall, visually, especially, the game holds up better than a lot of other PS1 games, but it's still a PS1 game, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But you look at the fog in Silent Hill 2, and it's vastly improved. And also just so much more obvious how thick the fog is.
Mm-hmm.
I was playing last night and streaming over Discord and talking to our friend George, and he commented on I completely forgot just how all-encompassing and thick that fog is, because you cannot see more than 5 feet in front of you. It is crazy.
There is a reason that when in real life it is foggy outside, people are like, oh, I'm in Silent Hill. Either that or I'm in Inaba from Persona 4. There are reasons when people just naturally make that reference to fog.
Mm-hmm. I make that reference to fog every single time I see it. The lighting was also made a lot more detailed. Stuff like if you get close to a monster, the closer you get to a monster while James's flashlight is shining on it, the shadow will get bigger. And that it's so cool and kind of bone chilling to see. Like visually, this is maybe one of the best looking games ever made, despite being a PlayStation 2 game. That shouldn't be a thing. And yet, here we are. I mean, it still deals with the problems of being a PlayStation 2 game. Like, it's still people being rendered on a PlayStation 2, and that only looks so good compared to what we have today. But still.
Did you see the meme out there where people were joking about, like, oh, humans rendered on PS2, they use short hair to limit, the amount of hair physics and polygons and all that, and then it's like causing me to like short-haired girls now.
No, I didn't, but that makes perfect sense, actually.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the two like shortcuts that if you've ever wondered, listener, why so many video game characters have short hair, that is why. They're a nightmare. That's also why video game characters don't tend to have capes very often until a certain point.
Yes.
And it's also why video game characters sleep on top of their covers. All these things that you start to see when you start to see how the sausage is made. I half recommend it, half don't. But visually, one of the things they apparently struggled with the most in Silent Hill, and I found this fascinating and hilarious, was finding camera angles that both matched their creative vision and also made the game playable by people. So, like, that makes perfect sense, because unlike Resident Evil, which at that time was using fixed camera angles, kind of like a movie, Silent Hill has a camera that you can sort of control, but not really, depending on where you are. And so I find it very interesting that they were like, this camera angle would look so good, but the player can't see what's happening. I think that would be so frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
But they pulled it off rather well, I think. In terms of art style, the influences apparently heavily came from the works of directors like David Lynch. Big surprise there.
Shocker.
Alfred Hitchcock. Big surprise there.
Another shocker.
David Cronenberg. David Fincher. And apparently specifically took a lot of inspiration from the 1990 film Jacob's Ladder.
Okay.
As well as other similar films. I've never seen Jacob's Ladder, but I always hear it brought up in relation to Silent Hill. So maybe I should see Jacob's Ladder, or maybe I shouldn't, depending on how you take that. They also apparently did a lot of research into other games, such as 1992's Alone in the Dark, which was a DOS game that is also considered to be one of the pioneers of survival horror. It is not a very good-looking game. I don't know if you've ever seen the original Alone in the Dark.
A little rough.
It is some goofy-looking video game. And they also studied 1996's Tomb Raider to see how they did 3D environments, because that game was one of the first that really did those extremely well. Because unlike the original game, unlike Resident Evil, which has pre-rendered backgrounds, Silent Hill is all like 3D. They're fully modeled and all that. And Silent Hill 2 was going to continue that trend. And so they looked at Tomb Raider to be like, so how did they do this? And I found that very interesting, because it's always neat to see that like Japanese devs are looking at Western games to be like, so what are they doing right? What can we copy? Because you always hear the stereotype of like Japanese devs, they're very insular and they don't really pay attention to what the rest of the world is doing. And some of them, that's correct. And like, you could say the same about Western devs, to be perfectly honest. But I love hearing stories of, no, that's not really true. They're paying attention. Everybody's paying attention and aping off of each other. My professor likes to say that there is no bigger den of thieves than the video game industry. Because they're all stealing from each other all the time, and they should. It makes games better. Apparently, in order to make sure that the people looked and moved just right, the artists apparently drew the characters from multiple angles and then made wireframes that were made up of 6,000 polygons each, which at the time I figure was probably a large amount.
Mm-hmm.
That's nothing compared to today. But like at that time, that was a pretty big deal. And they also used motion capture data to animate these wireframes after the fact. As for naming these characters, most of the characters were apparently named after real life sources. Mary's name is actually a reference to Jack the Ripper's last victim, Mary Jane Kelly. In association with that, this is not in the game, but apparently was planned at one point, James was going to have a dual personality named Joseph, which was a reference to one of the suspects for who was Jack the Ripper. This did not come to pass, and I'm kind of glad it didn't, because that sounds really dumb.
A little too on the nose there.
Little bit. Eddie was apparently named after Eddie Murphy.
Okay.
Because apparently at the start of the game, he had a far different personality, more pleasant, upbeat, and optimistic. I can't picture that to save my life. But yeah, named after Eddie Murphy. Who knew? Angela was named after the protagonist of the 1995 film The Net. Never heard of it, but I'll take your word for it. Same with where Laura's name was taken from, which was apparently the protagonist of a 1970 novel called No Language But a Cry. So, I don't know what either of those are, but that's where the names came from, if you were curious. The monsters of Silent Hill 2 were designed by art director Masahiro Ito, who had done the monster designs for the first game as well. He also did them for Silent Hill 3, I think, but then I don't believe came back to the franchise after that. He's listed as special thanks for every game after that, I believe. Ito's main prompt was apparently the words soured flesh, which is not something that I want to say ever, much less see written, but here we are. And he also worked to make them look kind of humanoid. He wanted to give them an element of humanity, is how Wikipedia described it, because these monsters were meant to reflect parts of James's subconscious. Pyramid Head as well. He is a reflection of how James believes that he should be punished for the things he has done. He is built to look like an executioner because of that. Silent Hill 2 is the game that introduced the nurses, which unfortunately also came back in more Silent Hill games. They shouldn't have, but they did. There are actually two exceptions to the whole, it's a reflection of James's subconscious thing. One is the creepers, which are little roach-like things. They actually come from Silent Hill 1. And the abstract daddy, which is a terrifying enemy that is actually connected to Angela's trauma instead of James's guilt. Because Angela has a real dark story that we will get into later. Fun fact, I guess, Ito would go on to also design monsters for the game Nightcry, which I've never heard of, but I feel like I should have.
The name sounds familiar, yeah.
The name sounds very familiar, but it's not ringing a bell. But he also, most recently, did monster designs for Metal Gear Survive.
Oh, that poor man.
That poor man. A fun note that I just didn't know where to put it, but while we're talking about visuals, why not put it here? In the game, in the first area of the game, the apartments, the Woodside apartments, you find a gun just sitting in a shopping cart in the middle of a room. And apparently this was their way of satirizing America's crazy gun culture, because remember, Silent Hill takes place in America.
And they're not wrong.
They are not incorrect. Silent Hill 2 has 6 endings, with 3 of them only being available on a replay, 2 of which are also joke endings. Both of which I think are probably more famous than the actual endings, which is a shame. One of them is the UFO ending, where James gets abducted by aliens with the help of Harry Mason, the protagonist of the first game. And the other is the most famous joke ending in video game history, I'm pretty damn sure. The dog ending.
Yeah.
Where it's revealed that a dog was controlling the events of the game from a control room the whole time, and it gets its own credits song and everything. It's really funny.
If you haven't seen that with the Shiba Inu, I think you're lying. You've had to have seen that. That's a classic.
I think it's the most famous ending from the entire game. Again, which is a shame because the leave ending is probably one of my favorite endings ever. It's just so good. The UFO ending, I believe, is a tradition in Silent Hill, because I think they all have a variation on it. At least 3 and Shattered Memories do. Shattered Memories, of course, is my favorite one because it does the UFO ending, and if you've ever played Shattered Memories, we'll talk more about that game in a bit, if you don't know what it is, but if you've ever played it, it's got a big part of the game that involves, like, a psychologist. You're talking to a psychologist, and once that ending happens, the psychologist is like, "Are you kidding me? Got abducted by aliens. Really? You know, if you're not going to take this seriously," and then he like leaves the room. It's so good. So I believe that one is at least a tradition, but the dog ending, unfortunately, is not, and for good reason. It could never be topped. So when the game came out, it was critically acclaimed, currently sitting at an 89 on Metacritic for the PS2 version. The other two versions aren't quite as highly rated. I think the PC version is in the 70s, but hey, many horror fans have proclaimed it both at the time and retroactively one of the best games in the genre, and it is largely considered a masterpiece. Again, like I said earlier, I saw multiple people say, like, if there was a Criterion collection for games, Silent Hill 2 would absolutely 100% be in it. Mm-hmm. The Xbox version, which released later than the PS2 version, like a couple of months after, was actually an extended edition, which makes it even weirder that neither of us knew that this version existed. Because the short bonus scenario Born from a Wish originated in that version. In Born from a Wish, the player actually takes control of Maria shortly before she meets James. It's a very, very short campaign. Doesn't add a huge amount outside of just giving Maria a small amount of backstory. This scenario did eventually come to the PS2 version as part of the Director's Cut re-release. But yeah, the Xbox version got that first. How have I never heard that version exists?
Beats me. I don't know.
And then, unfortunately, and this is, remember when I said we were just going to get real sad? Let's get real sad. Silent Hill has sort of had a downhill trajectory since this game came out. There are 2 sequels for the PlayStation 2. Well, there are 3 sequels for the PlayStation 2, but 2 notable sequels, being Silent Hill 3 and Silent Hill 4 The Room. Silent Hill 3 is generally well liked. I have played it. I enjoy that game a good amount. I think it's just as good as Silent Hill 2, but people might call me a crazy person, and honestly, they're probably correct. But Silent Hill 4 The Room, I have not played, and is generally kind of divisive. Some people really like it, but most Silent Hill fans I know have said, like, it's good, but I could not get myself to finish it. I don't exactly know why. It was a huge departure. In fact, a lot of people seem to believe that it started out as a different, like a non-Silent Hill game. It did not. It started as, it was always a Silent Hill game. That is a rumor that has been around for years. There is no truth to it. But yeah, I want to play 4. I was going to play it this year. Didn't end up having time. And 3 will 100% come up on this show at some point when we start repeating artists. Silent Hill 2 itself has even kind of gotten a raw deal since its release, because it was re-released alongside Silent Hill 3 in 2012 as part of the Silent Hill HD collection on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. And this collection is infamously bad. Like, infamously considered one of the worst HD re-releases any video game has ever had.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly due to the fact that the studio behind it, Hijinks Studio, was forced to work with unfinished versions of the games because Konami had thrown out the source code for the original Gold Masters of Silent Hill 2 and 3.
Thanks, Konami.
Two of the most beloved horror games of all time, and they just threw it away. So they had to deal with the next best thing, which was deal with an unfinished build that hadn't been fully QA tested or anything like that. It also features new voices, like new voice tracks for both games. 2's has the option to play with the original, like, voice tracks. But there seem to be differing reasons for both of these games having new voice tracks in them. 2 in particular, Troy Baker, who was casted as James Sunderland because, of course, he was, claims that the entire reason Silent Hill 2 got recasted was because of Guy Seehee, who is the original voice of James. Because he had demanded residuals for his performance in Silent Hill 2 in exchange for their use of his voice and his help with the HD collection. At which point Troy Baker had to explain, like, dude, those aren't a thing in video games. How would those even work? Like, as from what I understand, residuals are like every time a movie airs on TV, those actors get residuals. That director gets residuals. They get paid because that film was shown on TV or that show was shown on TV.
Often called royalty checks.
Yeah. How do you do that with a video game, dude?
Look, I'm sure Konami's got their numbers, but that's not how it works.
Yeah, so he had to explain, like, those aren't a thing in video games. After fan outcry, I guess Guy Seehee must have gotten his money because the original voice cast can be heard in the HD collection. Silent Hill 3 was not so lucky. Rumor has it that they just straight up lost the voice tracks entirely. So you cannot play Silent Hill 3 with the original voices in the HD collection. It was critically panned into space. Like, again, I said earlier, the HD collection for Silent Hill is considered one of the worst HD collections ever released. It is terrible. Matt McMuscles actually has a very interesting deep dive video into exactly what went wrong, more than I'm willing to go into today, and you should actually check it out. Team Silent would be the ones that developed Silent Hill 3 and 4, but after the release of Silent Hill 4, Konami disbanded Team Silent in favor of hiring Western studios to make future titles in the franchise, and this is where it largely starts to go downhill. In 2007, British developer Climax Studios released Silent Hill Origins for the PSP, with a port to the PS2 coming in 2008. This game is considered serviceable, but largely forgotten. It's a prequel. It takes place before the first game. 2008 saw the release of Silent Hill Homecoming on the PS3 and Xbox 360, which was developed by California-based studio Double Helix. This is largely disliked because for some stupid reason, it focuses on combat a lot. Like, you can do knife combos. You ever wanted to play a Silent Hill game where you can do knife combos? Me neither. And the fan base agrees with you because this is largely the least popular game in the entire franchise. 2009 saw the release of Silent Hill Shattered Memories, which is a game I mentioned earlier, for the Wii, the only Silent Hill game to ever release on a Nintendo platform, might I add. It was also developed by Climax Studios. And it is a reimagining of the first game, and honestly, this one's pretty good. Surprisingly, all things considered. So if you're going to play one modern Silent Hill game, that's the one you should go for. And in 2012, Silent Hill Downpour, was released for the PS3 and Xbox 360, developed by Czech studio Vatra Games. Yeah, a studio from the Czech Republic made a Silent Hill game. Like, isn't that kind of weird? Cool, but weird.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd outreach, yeah.
Or at least it would be cool if the game didn't suck. It was met with incredibly mediocre reception, and that was the last mainline Silent Hill game ever released. Some spin-off games have been released, such as a rail shooter called Silent Hill the Arcade. Why? An escape room mobile game called Silent Hill the Escape. Why? And an isometric combat-based action RPG developed by WayForward called Silent Hill Book of Memories. Why? There are also 2 films based on the franchise. The first one is apparently a fun one. It's just called Silent Hill. It's apparently not very good. It's also not very accurate to the actual source material, but it's apparently a fun watch overall. I've never seen it. I've never seen either of them.
That's about what I've heard about the film, yeah.
Silent Hill Revelations, however, I've heard is not good. And neither movies are very well loved by moviegoers or franchise fans. Oh, well, like, that's just video game movies for you. What are you going to do? Texas-based studio Renegade Kid once pitched a DS Silent Hill title to Konami, but they were turned down because Konami did not want to hand a small, unproven company the Silent Hill license. That's fair. So they just developed that title as Dementium the Ward, which did come out for the DS. After the success of that game, they went back to Konami and pitched another Silent Hill title. And this time, Konami said no because they did not, quote, have interest in releasing a horror game for the DS at this time. That game was then developed and released as Dementium 2. And there are also 3 notable canceled titles in the franchise. Apparently, another DS installment was being developed by WayForward in 2006, for which they developed a one-room prototype using assets from Silent Hill 2, and then the game was quickly canceled. The Canadian studio Silicon Knights, which you might have heard of in the past, when it shut down, they apparently revealed all of the games they had been working on, one of which was a game called Silent Hill The Box. Not much is known about this game outside of a single screenshot that was released.
And it's probably a good thing because that's a terrible title.
Yeah, it's not great. And of course, you knew it was going to come up. Most famously, a game was in development for PS4 titled Silent Hills. It was announced using the famous PT, or playable teaser, and which is a horrifying short game, in my opinion, one of the scariest games ever released, that ends in a teaser for the game. It was set to be a collaboration between Metal Gear creator Hideo Kojima, director Guillermo del Toro, and legendary horror manga artist Junji Ito, with Norman Reedus set to play the main character. But during Kojima's break with Konami, the game was canceled and PT was infamously completely scrubbed from the PlayStation Store. 100%. You cannot download it anymore. Even if you downloaded it at one point and deleted it, you can never download it again.
So if you still got it on your PS4, that's pretty valuable.
Pretty much. There were people selling, like breaking eBay's rules, selling PS4s with PT still loaded on them, because I believe eBay has they have a rule that you have to factory reset hardware before you sell it. So,
but yeah, those were going upwards of $1,000 easily.
Oh yeah, it's to this day like one of the biggest examples of here's why the all digital future sucks. And I still consider it one of those great examples. But don't worry, Konami's still got you covered, because they just announced a Silent Hill game this week, or last week, I guess. It's a slot machine. Thanks, Konami.
Hey. Gosh.
It's just, so, like, Konami is famous for shafting a lot of its big franchises like Castlevania fans, they've gotten shafted a lot. Metal Gear fans, they've gotten shafted a lot. Bomberman fans, they've gotten shafted a lot. I don't think any franchise in the history of video games has gotten shafted as hard as Silent Hill has. And I was talking, again, to our friend George the other night, where he brought up, like, I don't know, Half-Life kind of got shafted, and I had to be like, yeah, but like, Half-Life got shafted because they didn't release games. Meanwhile, I consider it kind of worse that a lot of the modern Silent Hill releases are the kind of thing where most people say, like, I'd rather have nothing. I'd rather this franchise stopped at 4 and then never released anything else ever again. Because this is somehow worse.
Yeah, they threw new releases in the ground. They stepped on them. Like,
it's so bad. So that's what I meant when I said we were going to get real sad. Let's get a little bit better and talk about the composer of Silent Hill. So excited. Akira Yamaoka. Oh yeah. Yamaoka was born on February 6th, 1968 in Niigata, Japan. And as a kid, he was a fan of 80s British bands, apparently. Even at some point, he was a member of a punk band while in school, though he doesn't go any further into details on this outside of saying, quote, "That's something I can never play on Silent Hill." Incorrect, sir. You definitely can. I would let you. At this time, he also did what I've noticed a lot of the Japanese composers did. Not the Electone. This is not another addition to the list, unfortunately. But he did buy himself a computer and taught himself how to use a sequencer, which seems to be something that almost every single Japanese composer we've talked about has in common.
Mm-hmm.
However, he didn't actually initially plan to go into music, because he went to the Tokyo Art College to study product and interior design. Music was just a hobby for him. According to him, his musical influences include Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, Metallica and Depeche Mode, as well as the work of Angelo Badalamenti, who is famous for his work on soundtracks for David Lynch productions.
That's a name we've brought up before, Badalamenti.
I believe so, but I don't remember who we brought that up to in relation to. But yeah, we've mentioned Badalamenti before. His name looks super familiar. When asked if his studies on design helped him at all in his music career, he said a quote that I don't quite know what he means, but I figured it was worth bringing up. He says, "At that time, Mick Karn of Japan, Steve Strange of Visage, and a lot of other musicians combined the notions of art and music with their own new style. I got really influenced by that. Therefore, every time I write songs, I try to combine art and music." And I'm not entirely sure what he means by that, but also I'm entirely sure what he means by that. It's this weird thing where I get what he's saying, but I don't know how to put it into words.
Trying to elevate music beyond just music.
Yeah, and he absolutely does that. It's unclear to me what actually led to him fully moving into the music industry, because most interviews that I could find with him he doesn't seem to be very eager to talk about his early life, because most of the time when people would ask him questions about it, he'd just sort of gloss over them, and that's fine, whatever. A lot of people believe that the first game soundtrack he ever worked on was the 1991 Super Nintendo game Smart Ball. But in one of the interviews I found, when he was specifically asked about this, he legitimately said, "That was so long ago, I don't actually remember." So it's still up in the air, but most people believe that that was his first video game work. He joined Konami in 1993 and immediately started working on some of their more sizable franchises like Contra or Sparkster. And he was with Konami for 16 years, actually, and left the company in 2009, December of 2009. And a few months later, and I didn't know this, joined Grasshopper.
What?
He works for Grasshopper.
Oh.
I didn't know this. I had no idea. He's still there. He joined Grasshopper in 2010, and has been there ever since. Has been there for the past 9 years. Still serves as chief sound officer and also does some of the music for some of their games. Absolutely, he's good friends with Suda51. Like, that was news to me. I had no idea.
The things you learn on this show.
Yeah. You'd think that would have been something that one of us would have heard about.
I mean, right? Yeah, because he's one of those, iconic figures. Akira Yamaoka is. We've talked about him even on, I think it was the Rakuen episode.
Yeah.
So the collaboration there.
He's a big name in video game music, and I kind of just figured he was still with Konami. I'm glad he's not, but I figured he was. He apparently still has a great love for the Silent Hill franchise. He regularly performs music from the games live at various music festivals around the world. And upon the announcement of Silent Hills, Let's Get Sad Again, he voiced interest in returning as the composer for the game. I think he probably would have, because he also seems to be pretty good friends with Hideo Kojima.
Mm-hmm.
And we never heard if this actually would have happened. I really hope that Kojima would have done it, because we know that Kojima sort of has a thing where he likes to bring in big Hollywood folks to do stuff. But I really hope that he knew that it ain't Silent Hill if it's not Yamaoka.
Yeah, and Kojima was really high up at Konami at the time, and Yamaoka wasn't going to be anyone that would have slighted him. So I think that would have been a reasonable, tangible connection to make.
Absolutely. And like, I know some people might say like, well, if he was saying that he was interested in returning, that meant he wasn't returning. They bring in composers really late in development. Music's not actually that important from a game development standpoint. From a game standpoint, it's extremely important, but as you've probably learned from this show, they're not like the first people called.
Unless there are extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, there are a couple where we've talked about people saying, yeah, I was on from the beginning, and that usually is followed by saying, which is unusual. So that should give you an idea of that. As for his discography, again, Smartball, that is rumored to be his first game. He has done 2 games in the Contra series, being Hardcore and Shattered Soldier. He did both games in the Sparkster series, being Sparkster and Sparkster Rocket Knight Adventures 2. Notably alongside Michiru Yamane for both of them.
I think we mentioned those on her episode, yeah.
Mm-hmm. He did the sound programming on the PC Engine and Sega CD versions of Snatcher, which is another reason why I think he probably would have been in with Kojima.
Uh-huh.
According to Wikipedia, this might not be completely true, but whatever. His first solo composing job was on the game International Superstar Soccer Pro for the PlayStation. Sure. He is, of course, the Silent Hill guy. He has done every single main series game except for Downpour, which was another reason why people weren't super hopeful for Downpour, because it was announced that Yamaoka was not coming back for it because he had left Konami by that point. That's another reason why I feel like Kojima would have been like, all right, we're making a Silent Hill game. We have to get Akira Yamaoka, because people were mad when they found out that Yamaoka was not doing the music for Downpour. Like, legitimately angry. He did the music for the Rumble Roses games, both of them, alongside others. The less said about that, the better. And then he's done a ton of stuff since he joined Grasshopper. I'm just going to list the ones that I recognized, because it's a lot of games. They've made more games than I thought they had. But the ones I recognize, he worked on Liberation Maiden, Lollipop Chainsaw, which was their big release around the time that he showed up, Killer is Dead, The Silver Case, Let It Die, and of course, the 25th Ward, The Silver Case, which is a sequel to The Silver Case, alongside Masafumi Takada, notably. He also contributed to the soundtrack for Puzzle and Dragons X, which is a massive franchise over in Japan. He did a remix in Persona 4 Dancing All Night. He did the remix of Time to Make History, which is one of my favorite remixes in that entire game. And he also worked alongside Jeff Dana on the music for both of these Silent Hill films. So even the films got Akira Yamaoka. Like, he's the Silent Hill guy. And I found this interesting. He also did music for a radio drama that was based on Snatcher. That was a collaboration between Hideo Kojima and Suda51.
Okay, Kojima would have definitely called Yamaoka then.
Absolutely, 100%. He would have done the music for Silent Hills. I'm so sad that game will never happen. The game would have been so good. I'm going to cry. So, some historical development research. I know, I've been talking for an hour about Silent Hill 2. We haven't even gotten to the music yet. I knew this was going to happen. I'm so sorry. I love this game. When the call came for somebody to do Silent Hill's music, the original game, Yamaoka apparently volunteered because he thought that no one else was going to be capable of doing that soundtrack justice. And initially, he was only brought on to do the music, but then ended up involved with the overall sound design as well. This carried over into Silent Hill 2 and all the other Silent Hill games. This was the correct decision. Yamaoka believes this game to be the first game to really introduce rock and industrial music into gaming, quote, especially in Japan, and even more especially in a non-gimmicky way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like non-ironically for sure.
Yeah. And one quote that I absolutely love that I think really sums up his approach to sound design in this franchise. Quote, "I wanted it to be unpredictable. Maybe during a big scare, I cut everything out. And maybe if nothing was happening at all, there'd be a lot of sound. Sometimes in Silent Hill, you will walk into a room, and the music will become incredibly intense and frightening. And there will be absolutely nothing in that room. And sometimes you'll walk into a room, and there are enemies in there, and it's just silent. There's nothing. And this isn't like a predictable thing because he goes back and forth about whether or not he does these things all the time. It's so... Akira Yamaoka is a sound design genius. He might be one of the best sound designers currently working in video games. Bar none, I think. And Silent Hill is a masterclass in sound design.
I mean, not to knock other people's work, but you look at...
Yeah.
But you look at, Five Nights at Freddy's. And it's like every time it pops up, it's the sort of sound. And it's like, okay, yeah, jump scare. We get it. I mean, But the unpredictability, that's wild.
There are a lot of very talented sound design people in video games. And I'm even like bringing up your example of Five Nights at Freddy's. I still think that overall that game is incredibly well designed. And the sound is a big part of it. But like Yamaoka is a different level from everybody, man. This is not me knocking other sound designers. This is me being like, Akira Yamaoka is a god among men. So good. The game also features an extensive use of sound effects because just Yamaoka wanted so many sounds. There are 50 different sound effects in total, even just for walking around, including like just walking on broken glass. Like that was unheard of at the time. If James walks on broken glass, it'll actually make the sound. I was walking around the apartment building last night while replaying it, and depending on what texture, like the hallways of the apartment have carpet, but some of them are kind of like rotted away and the wood is showing, and there's a different sound depending on if your foot comes down on the carpet or the wood. That's how crazy he got.
It sounds normal now, but in 2001...
Yeah, it was incredible. Also, for this reason, much of the game's soundtrack is composed of unnatural sounding machine noises and strange creatures breathing, screams, auto-tuned. The first Silent Hill game has a song that is a dental drill auto-tuned. And it's one of the more interesting songs in that game, and it's just as fun to listen to as it sounds. It's the final boss theme, I'm pretty sure. A very good example of this, I think, is the song Silent Heaven. like there's a bunch of just this, you can hear these creatures like sort of breathing in the background. At one point, it's not in the clip, because I think the clip that you grabbed is very like, that's indicative. That's what you hear most of the time in Silent Hill 2. But there's also a part where it's just like this deep bass sound with this like rusted out machine sound. It's so good. I love this soundtrack so much. And lastly, and most importantly, I think Yamaoka also makes careful use of silence throughout the game, saying, quote, "Selecting moments of silence is another way of producing sound." He is absolutely correct. And the final note, the most interesting note, I think, this is his favorite game soundtrack that he's ever worked on.
Yeah.
So, all right. I've talked for an hour. Let's get into the music. Starting with our first critical track, there's no other song that I could start with. The theme of Laura. This is the main theme of Silent Hill 2. It plays during the opening FMV, and it also plays during the credits, mainly. And this is probably one of my favorite main themes of any game ever.
Mm-hmm.
This song's a masterpiece.
Yeah, this is the one that you have to know from this game. And not like because it's, the first one that plays, but like you get into it and like you vibe with it immediately. This is the one that absolutely had to be here. Difficult to pick, a top five, five critical tracks, but this one, yes, for sure.
Absolutely difficult to pick a top five in this game. I struggled with it very hard. I don't think it was as hard as Chrono Trigger. That will remain the king, but
right.
This one was very, very hard. Yamaoka says that this song took 3 days to write, and his goal was to combine a sad melody with a strong beat. He wanted it to evoke emotions in the player. It does. I get emotional whenever I hear this song. I love the mix of the guitar and the violin. And at one point, I don't know what instrument that is, but it sounds like it's the same instrument that plays the original Silent Hill theme, doing the tremolo notes. It's very reminiscent of that, and I think that's on purpose, obviously.
Sure.
I don't know what instrument that is.
Might be a mandolin.
I think so. It's something doing very fast tremolo notes. But I'm not entirely sure. But that part especially is just one of my favorites. Great song. After that, we have Promise Reprise. This is a nice, somber piano piece that regularly plays when talking to other people that are trapped in the town during cutscenes like Eddie and Angela and Laura. And it's just, this is a really catchy piano piece. Like the dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. Like, it's just, it's so good. I think this is probably the standout song when it comes to songs that play during cutscenes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is number 2 for sure that you got to put in here.
And I was struggling between this and one of the songs on my cutting room floor. Also because obviously this song has Reprise in the title, and I can't not mention Promise. Which is the song this is a reprise to. And it's a completely different piece. obviously, and this one plays near the start of the game, the original Promise, and it's just a great example of Yamaoka's prowess on guitar, because he's a fantastic guitar player. And both of these songs are just really, really good. I love them dearly. But it's time to get away from the somberness, because our next track is Ashes and Ghost. Those heavy drums, that feel of panic. It's just, this is one of those horror songs in the game. I thought that this game only played through one particular sequence where you are being chased through a hallway by Pyramid Head. But then while replaying last night, I walked out into a hallway where an enemy was, and it just sort of started playing out of the blue. Also started playing when I just walked into an empty apartment building or apartment room. So, yeah, it's just one of those that just plays all the time. But I think this is a really good song to be like, this is the tone of Silent Hill 2 right here.
Yeah.
Most of the time. After that, we have Terror in the Depths of the Fog. I don't remember where this plays, actually. But I love this song. This one's weird in terms of, like, music in Silent Hill 2. Because it's mostly built around a heavy and catchy beat. And at one point, though, it just turns into these deep and muffled bass notes. Like this dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun. And just that becomes the song for a while. And I absolutely, like, the variety on some of these songs. So good.
You know, can someone put like a hip hop to this beat and just like put that, have this as your backing track for a hip hop beat?
I would be shocked if there is not a rap somewhere with using this as the backing beat.
It would be so perfect. It's so good.
It's like there's so many rappers that are video game fans. Surely one of them's a Silent Hill fan, right?
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And then we come to my favorite song in the entire game. Theme of Laura, Reprise. This is an absolutely heartbreaking piano and violin piece, and it plays during my favorite cutscene in the entire game. So I'm going to spoil this. It's not a huge spoiler, obviously. And again, this game came out, in 2001. That was almost 20 years ago. So go play it already. But Angela, like I mentioned, has a very, very, very dark backstory. She was abused by her father, physically and sexually, and ended up killing him at one point. Like, she stabbed him to death because she couldn't take the abuse anymore. And the running theory by fans is Silent Hill draws in people with a lot of baggage to punish them, basically. The quote unquote lore reason, I don't think there's an actual official lore reason, is that Silent Hill is built over a portal to hell, which I find kind of goofy. and I like it better not knowing why Silent Hill is the way it is. But one very established thing about Silent Hill is that it does not appear the same to two people at once. Mm-hmm. What James sees is not what Harry Mason saw. It's not what Heather Mason sees. It's not what Eddie sees. Laura sees it as a regular town with people. She doesn't see the abandoned, disgusting Silent Hill that James sees. She just sees a town. But Angela sees Silent Hill as always being on fire. Always. And at one point, James walks into a room where everything is on fire, and he's seeing Silent Hill the way that Angela sees it all the time. And they have this big conversation, and the running fan theory is that Angela was not drawn to Silent Hill to punish her. Angela was drawn to Silent Hill because her guilt for killing her dad was so strong, and Silent Hill was trying to, give her an out. Try to portray that, you have no reason to be guilty. These people should be guilty, but you don't have a reason for that. And while they're talking about the whole thing and about how she didn't find her mom and all of the events of the game, James says, "It's hot as hell in here." And Angela just says, "You see it too? For me, it's always like this." And then the cutscene ends, and in-game, you can see Angela walking up the stairs, and James cannot follow her because of the fire, and then you never see Angela again for the rest of the game. She's just gone. Mm. It is one of the best cutscenes in a horror game I've ever seen, possibly in a game I've ever seen. I don't do it justice. Go look it up. Go play Silent Hill 2. All of you. If you don't like horror games, that's fair. Don't play Silent Hill 2. You probably won't like it. But
watch a Let's Play, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, watch an LP. The Super Best Friends did a very, very good Let's Play of it back in the day, where they made a rule of when cutscenes start, we shut up. And it's a very good LP as a result. So absolutely go watch it. This song is fantastic. That cutscene is fantastic. I love it. So, tracks on the cutting room floor. That's right. An hour and 15 minutes in. We're still going. You have two, and I want to hear about them.
So I picked my two without any knowledge of where they play in the game, but listen to the soundtrack, and I'm like, what are ones that you haven't picked that I feel would best flesh out what I know from the soundtrack just from listening to it? And so I'll start with Fermata in Mystic Air. Just an enchanting horror soundscape. I think it's one of those ones when people say oh, do the rainy mood and Godot's theme from Ace Attorney and just put it on and let yourself do work, just do a long one. Find a long looping version of this song, because the piano, the record sounds, the emulated choir, yeah, really good to just kind of let your mind clear and get work done to this song. I don't know if you have any insight on where the song is in game, though.
I don't remember, honestly. I think I know where your other one plays, but this one, it's been too long since I replayed the game. I gotta continue it so I can find out.
Yeah, but this was one I knew had to be here regardless, whether if you picked it or if I had to put it here. The other one is Betrayal. So what about this one? What do you know about this one?
I believe this plays during a boss fight with two pyramid heads.
Okay.
The final time that Pyramid Head appears, as far as I'm aware.
That sounds about right from what I can picture the song being. Because, like, it's way scarier than Fermata and Mystic Air. But yeah, just a remarkable soundscape with the heavy, again, these heavy machine beats and strikes, so effective. And then, like, this just heavy chorus coming in. So, really good stuff. But yours are also fantastic.
My first one is Alone in the Town. Which is another cutscene song that's just incredibly catchy. I seem to remember this playing during the first time you meet Maria, but I'm not entirely sure that's accurate, so don't quote me on that. You'd think I'd know, seeing as I saw this cutscene last night, but I don't remember. But this song is ridiculously catchy. It's another standout song that plays in cutscenes. I like it a lot.
For sure. I think this is one that definitely had to, whether we put it in the 5 or the cutting room floor, like, this is when you hear it and it's like, oh yeah, this is definitely Silent Hill 2's score.
And the other one is True.
Yes, it is.
This is a very somber piano piece. I really love it. I believe this plays during the moment when it is revealed what James has done.
Oh, interesting.
I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong, but that's where I seem to remember it playing. I meant to look these cutscenes up before we recorded, but things happened. Let me pull the curtain back a little bit, guys. This has been a really, hard episode to schedule.
Yeah, it's been a week.
But I love this song. This is the one that I was between this and Promised Reprise, but, Promise won the day, man. It had to.
Yeah. Yeah, this one's very good as well, especially when, the violin soars in and kind of takes over the melody. Just very, very good.
Mm-hmm. So, what will I never forget about Silent Hill 2? First of all, if you have any interest in game design at all, whatsoever, I'd say even if you don't like horror games, you should play this game. 'Cause this game is a master class in game design. I think this is one of the best examples, the best early examples at least, of just how far you can take video game design. And I think we've gotten better examples since, obviously. But in my opinion, this one is one of the gold standards. And if you have any interest in the art form at all, you should play Silent Hill 2. 100%. Also, I'll never forget the sound design. Again, I can't say it enough. Akira Yamaoka is a master at sound design. He's a genius. But also, while trying to look up where Promise played, I stumbled across the Leave ending, which is one of the serious endings. There are 2 endings that you can get on your first playthrough. One being one where James commits suicide by driving his car off a cliff into the water. That's called the in-water ending. But the one that I like the best, and the one that I consider to be the best ending, even though Konami has never stated which one is canon, and I'm fine with that, is the Leave ending, where James finally confronts what he's done, confronts his guilt, and he and Laura leave the town of Silent Hill. And over the visualization of them leaving, Mary reads her entire letter. And the performance by Monica Taylor Horgan is astounding. One of the more killer voice performances I've ever heard. Which is funny because most of the voice performances in this game are corny and goofy. But this one is breathtakingly good. And it's one of those, like we talked about BioShock a couple weeks ago, BioShock Infinite, where remember when we were talking about May the Circle Be Unbroken? Mm-hmm. And that one section of the song where she just sounds heartbroken. It's that. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, Monica started crying while reading this script.
Mm.
It's so good. If you listen to anything from this game outside of the music, go listen to that performance because it's absolutely worth your time. It's so good.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that Konami's never picked a canon ending because I always thought it was that one. So
most people consider that the canon ending, but Konami has apparently always been very ambiguous as to which one is actually canon.
They're like, I don't know. It may be the dog. For me, it's definitely the soundtrack. I mean, to listen to it without much knowledge of playing the game, but still remember and recognize so many of these songs. I mean, yeah, it only shows how great Akira Yamaoka's work really is. So kudos. I know, a long segment, but very, very, very important and worth it.
And it's like, this is one of my favorite games of all time. Like, I absolutely adore this game. I need to play it more often than I do. So now let's finally get to our transition. Now that I've talked for as long as a normal episode usually is, usually we like to highlight a fan cover or remix. For me, this was actually surprisingly hard to find one. Not because like the quality of the covers or remixes were low, but because this is already such an amazing soundtrack that finding one that I was really happy with was really hard. And I finally did stumble upon one from YouTube channel Chris McTavish. Apparently he also goes by Psycho Crusher. He did a guitar/rock cover of Theme of Laura. So please enjoy that. And we will be right back.
Alright, so I won't talk for nearly as long.
I certainly hope not.
Mostly because you guys have not heard how much I'm hacking away and coughing in the background, but we'll try to get through this. Also because I am not good at Polish names, so we're gonna have a time with this one. Let's talk about The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Now, The Witcher is a famous series of fantasy novels by Polish author Andrzej Sapkowski. It's like a point of pride for the country as far as I knew. Or at least have read, have learned. Just, it seems to be a big deal in Poland. Like, just to jump ahead, when The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt was released, like, the Prime Minister and President of Poland, like, came out to the developer to celebrate the release of this game. Like, it's a big deal for the country as far as I know. So, starting in 2007, developer CD Projekt Red created The Witcher, which was a video game that took inspiration from these Sapkowski stories. And it actually used the BioWare proprietary engine, the Aurora engine. Like, you know, the one I guess it was like Neverwinter Nights, like early 2000s BioWare engine. But that was like the foundation. And it's a game that shows its age, but it certainly has its devoted fans. When it came to the sequel, 2011's The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings, CD Projekt Red really made a name for themselves. And it was a game that was well regarded, critically acclaimed. I tried to play it before playing The Witcher 3, and I had technical struggles on PC, and I guess this was apparently due to DRM or things like that. So I didn't have the best first impression of of The Witcher 2. But because of how well received it was, it certainly created an enthusiasm in the game industry for a sequel and made that highly anticipated. So The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt was released worldwide on PS4, Xbox One, and PC on May 19th, 2015. There was a Game of the Year edition that was released with all of the DLC, just all bundled in and included. That was released on August 30th, 2016. And now, a port of the full game to Nintendo Switch, titled The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Complete Edition, is out today. So, get that on Switch. Somehow they crunched it all down into one card, graphic resolution and all be damned, but they still did it. And that's honestly remarkable to take Geralt's adventures on the go. So yes, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is developed by CD Projekt Red and published by CD Projekt. It is distributed to retailers in North America by Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment, and in the PAL region, so Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, distributed by Bandai Namco. So if you see the box art and it's like, Bandai Namco, WB, like, what is this doing on a CD Projekt Red game? That's why. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is a third-person action role-playing game with sword and magic combat and a big emphasis on narrative conversational choice. The idea of the titular Witcher, a Witcher is a human in this universe who has specialized abilities that make them capable as a monster hunter. They're trained since childhood in combat, tracking, alchemy, and magic. They're made stronger, faster, resistant to toxins by mutagens. Players overall will use a silver sword for creatures and a steel sword for humans. So if you see the main character have two swords on his back, that's why. You also have a variety of spells that are used in combat or exploration, just a variety of capabilities there. So because it's kind of based on the lore of this world of these novels, it would probably take too long to kind of explain what's happening overall in the world, but the developers at CD Projekt Red really wanted players to kind of try getting in on the ground running with this series, with this game. And so they kind of try to explain what's going on roughly. And so if I were to put it in a certain way, I'd say like it's a time of chaos and misery on the continent, which is, they call it the continent. So it's just as is. And the dimensions of men and monsters have intertwined. So you have the Empire of Nilfgaard trying to expand into the helpless northern kingdoms. So there's all this war and political intrigue raging on, continues from the last game, which was especially heavy in all this political intrigue. All the while, you have these ghastly spectral riders that are known as the Wild Hunt, ding, ding, ding title, and they've been spotted throughout the land. But when it comes to the Witcher known as Geralt of Rivia, who is the protagonist, the character that you play, his interests are far more personal. Ciri, who is a young girl who Geralt trained at the Witcher stronghold of Kaer Morhen, she's been missing for quite some time now, though her presence throughout the land has been occasionally reported. So Geralt really wants to find his ward, Ciri. And the first lead comes from Yennefer of Vengerberg, who is the love of Geralt's life, and she's been particularly difficult to track down herself. So Geralt's Witcher tracking skills must begin there. The questions being asked here: what is the true significance of Ciri, and where could she be? Also, who else from Geralt's storied past will be involved in this journey from the previous games? But also, what does the otherworldly Wild Hunt want in all of this? So here's where I'll ask you, what are our experiences with The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt?
I've never touched it. I think I played an hour of The Witcher 1.
Wow, what a first impression with that series.
I actually kind of enjoyed the little bit of Witcher 1 that I played. I would love to play Witcher 3. It is one of those games on my, I'm going to get to it eventually, list. But there's only so much time in the day.
And it's a terribly daunting, long game. I think that's the reason why I played some of it. I really enjoyed it. But my history with it is I was really fascinated, like in the weeks leading up to the launch of this game, and seeing the reviews, I'm like, oh, I gotta play this game. I gotta learn about this game. I looked into the backstory of these Witcher games and what happens to try to catch up, especially when I couldn't play some of 2. And then I play it, but then I'm hearing things like, oh, well, there's technical struggles, especially on PS4 when I bought it. I got a launch day. I got this nice Best Buy seal case of the game, all of it. So I'm like, you know what? I played 6 hours. I completed all of White Orchard, this prologue area that kind of gets you in the ground running in the game. It doesn't take 6 hours, certainly, to get out of White Orchard. But I wanted to do everything. I was fascinated, but there were patches coming out and fixes and this. I'm like, you know what? I have other things to play. I'll just wait.
Was Witcher 3 the one with the weird cow glitch? I don't remember what exactly it was, but I remember there being some form of bull or cow glitch.
Maybe. I know Geralt's horse Roach has some really weird glitches too. So it could be just a livestock thing. But yeah, so overall, I just never got back to it. And then I saw someone else play it and got about that far too. So it's just one of those ones I really, really, really need to get back to it because I enjoyed it so much. It was right up my alley, but it's such a big game with so many side quests and so many things to do. And it's I need to play it in a time where there are no other games for a month or 2. Seriously, it's just that daunting. But yeah, so I'm fond of this game, but I'm also kind of scared by it to go back to it. Development for The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt started in 2011, and the overall budget for the project has been estimated about as much as $81 million. The project began with about 150 in-house employees at CD Projekt Red, and it ended with about 250. But when it came to people being involved in the production globally, apparently it reached as much as 1,500 people, which is crazy because the game was localized in 15 languages with about 500 voice actors. The script had about 450,000 words and 950 speaking roles, and these were all recorded from late 2012 to early 2015. Now, Geralt of Rivia is famous for having Doug Cockle as his voice actor. And Doug Cockle hasn't gone on, I don't think, to do too many notable voices other than Geralt, but he has the very distinct voice, and it happens to work that I'm very not well today, but when Geralt talks and it's just this gravelly voice and he's just, it's not, David Hayter in the sense, but it's that gravelly voice that you really identify solely with that character. And so Geralt is just, he doesn't have much of a personality, but he just kind of talks like this, and that's Doug Cockle's voice. And that's just kind of how he is. I think it's also important to note, though, Charles Dance is also in this game, and he plays Emperor Emir Var Emrys. So he's an important figure. He's the emperor of the Empire of Nilfgaard. But Charles Dance, Tywin Lannister in Game of Thrones. So it's just this deep, British voice, and almost Christopher Lee-like, but an actor that, yeah, if you know Game of Thrones, you know the voice of Tywin Lannister. And here it is in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. A lot of other great performances in this game, certainly, but not necessarily the most famous voice actors that everyone would know, but it's a matter of continuing roles from previous games. So it just makes sense there. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt was revealed in 2013 with a trailer, and it was presented with a 2014 release window. There was a delay eventually that happened from Q3 2014 to February 24th, 2015, and they were going to try to hit that date. But when about 5,000 bugs were present in around December 2014, CD Projekt was like, nah, we're not going to be able to hit that. So
Thank God they had the ability to tell themselves that, to make that decision. Because if you've ever wondered, dear listener, why sometimes games come out very broken, it's because usually they don't have that option.
Yeah, they'd have like, publisher pressures and things like that. You got to hit, this fiscal window. So yeah, they push it out of that fiscal year to May 19th, 2015. And then they hit that. When the game was marketed, it was apparently done so, and I learned this for the first time, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt was marketed as Skyrim in a Game of Thrones sauce. And that's not entirely wrong. That's actually kind of accurate. It's not, I don't think, as well, versed as Skyrim. Like, you can't do everything in The Witcher 3 like you can in Skyrim. But it's kind of like that sort of medieval-like setting, and it's very Game of Thrones, like with all the intrigue and things like that. So I get that, but I just never heard that phrase before. Skyrim and a Game of Thrones sauce. But one of the most interesting things that happened with this game's marketing, and it still plagued me until I actually researched it. The game was originally revealed as, The Witcher 3, and it had like the Arabic number 3 kind of clawed out in a very chat, like, zigzag kind of 3. But, the actual numeral itself. But CD Projekt, whatever pressures they kind of decided, yeah, like I mentioned before, we want new players to get involved and jump into this game for the first time. So eventually they changed that 3 into a 3 vertical stripes, like the Roman numeral 3, right? So it was done kind of as, that 3 could have represented a claw mark or a mask to an audience that was unfamiliar with the series. And fans then would recognize that mark as the mark of the Wild Hunt in universe. So it was supposed to kind of play off of that. There was even talk for a while that, like, do we just release the game and call it just The Witcher Wild Hunt? Do we not even include the 3? That didn't happen. But I remember, like, the conversations were there for a while. It's trying to strike that balance of, we don't want to have the apprehension of, oh, well, I don't want to play the 3rd game in a series, but they want the new audiences as well. So found that super interesting.
That's smart. And yeah, that is quite interesting, actually. I've never thought of that because I always knew it was a sequel, obviously, but neat.
Part of the marketing brilliance, in a way, actually, was on CD Projekt Red's part, where they really endeared themselves to not only their audience, but the gaming press. When on launch day, they released 16 pieces of DLC for free. And they had a whole cutout in the physical release of the game that was just like, we want to thank our players who have stuck with us so much. We're offering all these, mostly like costumes, skins, things like that. But we're offering all these things for free. And here you go. The game was reviewed very well. Metacritic scores in the low to mid 90s. The game's world, the graphic design, the narrative, the side quest design, the Bloody Baron, my goodness, people keep pointing that one out. They're all points of praise. And there were, some technical difficulties that were criticized at launch, but it was among one of the many fixes in subsequent patches. But The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is one of, if not the most awarded games of this generation, if not all time. It received over 250 Game of the Year awards in 2015, which was the most ever for a game at the time, surpassing The Last of Us's totals. And I think that still is the record for most Game of the Year awards for a game in the year. It received over 800 awards by August 2016. So I'm not going to go through the different awards and here's what it won. It won a ton of awards. And this is in 2015, a year where Metal Gear Solid 5 was another standout, where Undertale was an indie standout. And we've talked about great games from 2015, but this is the one from that year. And it's one of the games of the generation, certainly. As far as sales numbers go, it shipped over 20 million copies as of June 2019. I think I saw a stat that it beat Witcher 2 sales numbers in the first week or so by 600%, or six,
wow,
or 6, might have been 6,000%. it did gangbusters well for this series, made it such a big deal that when they're planning, DLC plans for The Witcher 3, they had expansions that were planned. CD Projekt Red, they're like, we're going to have 2 expansions. One's going to be called Heart of Stone. One's going to be called Blood and Wine. And, they'll be out later. And yeah, they're both great too. They're critically acclaimed and well regarded and all that. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, Blood and Wine in particular, that standalone, I don't even think it's standalone, that expansion won Best RPG at the Game Awards 2016. Like, an expansion for the RPG just won that whole award for that year. But that wouldn't be it for the Witcher series as far as games go. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt had a card side game in it called Gwent. And it was something that you could ignore entirely if you wanted to. But I guess people who played Gwent in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt were like, yeah, I want to play Gwent on its own. And of course, there's a time when Hearthstone is a big deal with Blizzard and all that. So CD Projekt Red said, hey, we're going to make Gwent the Witcher card game, which is a 2018 video game release, as well as Thronebreaker The Witcher Tales, which was meant to be the single player expansion or single player mode, the campaign rather, to the Gwent card game. So they split them up into 2 releases, Gwent The Witcher card game being just like the core gameplay, and then Thronebreaker being the single player campaign. Both games came out in 2018, but a big deal, that Gwent spinoff. I don't know how well it did, but for those that were itching for it, they got it. Geralt of Rivia is also notable in a couple key crossovers. He's a guest playable character in Soul Calibur 6. He brought a Kaer Morhen stage with him. And Geralt and Ciri are also apparently playable, whether it's skins or through otherwise, through a cross-promotional content offering through Monster Hunter World.
It is not skins. I've seen it. They have cutscenes. There's a story.
What? Oh, man, that's
Oh,
crazy.
yeah. Yeah, like it's a straight-up crossover in Monster Hunter World. It's kind of nuts.
Good for them. I mean, yeah, they've had Aloy from Horizon Zero Dawn, just recently, Leon and Claire from Resident Evil with some Capcom, ex-Capcom work there. So, good for Monster Hunter. So, yeah, not the last that we ever saw of The Witcher and Geralt and all of this. The soundtrack for The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is primarily responsible for the man who composed it, and that is Marcin Przybyłowicz. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it, and I'm sorry if it's not. But because that's Przybyl. It's an L. It's an L with a cross in it. Owicz. So like it's Przybyłowicz, I think, because that L with a cross is like a W sound in English. Anyway, Marcin, born May 4th, 1985 in Poland. He apparently went through a full music education growing up, like part of a music-focused elementary, high school. He began composing while studying jazz conducting at F. Nowowiejski. Oh God, I'm sorry. What? This Academy of Music in Bydgoszcz, Poland. God, my bad.
I've never envied you less in my entire life.
And I'm usually like so good trying to like be accurate with pronunciations, but Polish, man, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's just one of those languages that's just like this isn't one that we have a lot of experience with. A lot of European languages are going to be that, unfortunately.
Maybe. So Przybyłowicz said, quote, "I used to play piano, then trumpet, and I wasn't good on either of those. So I had to figure out in my own way how to establish myself as a musician. And since I always loved movies and video games, as it kind of did strike me, why not marry these two main activities in my life? So basically entertainment and my music thing, and try to do something with that." Yeah, interesting that he said, I was only trained in music, but like I wasn't that good at playing music, but I didn't have like any other training. So, merge the entertainment that I love with composing that I like doing and just kind of go from there. He received a Young Talent Scholarship from the Polish national TV station TVP. And the result of this was he participated on the album The Witcher, music inspired from the game. So that must have got him maybe his foot in the door a little bit, just kind of recognition out there, maybe for CD Projekt a little bit. But his first really big project in game composition was with his friends, and they're making a Fallout 2 mod project. I guess, released in 2011, didn't have much critical reception. But Przybyłowicz's first game was, for CD Projekt Red at least, was 2011's The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings. He wasn't the main composer for that, though, but it kind of got his foot into the door. His discography for the Witcher series, at least, does include Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings, obviously 3 Wild Hunt, and he did the composing as well for Gwent and Thronebreaker. He did the sound design for The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, which I found that to be interesting. He worked on some other games that I may have heard the titles of, but we're talking Afterfall Insanity, Hard West, 7 The Days Long Gone, and Phantom Doctrine. He was also notable for working on a Polish historical TV drama series called Korona Królów, which translates to The Crown of Kings, and he is the lead composer on the upcoming CD Projekt Red game, Cyberpunk 2077. So, totally different instrument style for that game compared to this one.
I would imagine.
But I'll be very interested to see, what he ends up creating for Cyberpunk. Some development research on the Witcher 3 soundtrack. Przybyłowicz was the musical director as well as the lead composer. So he actually worked on site at CD Projekt Red for this title, as opposed to being like an off-site freelancer that they'd contact remotely and things like that. Though he also worked with Mikołaj Struński, who they worked together previously on The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, and they won awards and all that. So, Struński also being of Polish descent, he was living, though, in LA at the time. And so you had the 9-hour time difference there. So they had a way of working together where Przybyłowicz was in Warsaw at CD Projekt's headquarters in Poland, and then Struński is in LA. While The Witcher 2's score was apparently more of a Western, epic, symphonic, blockbuster sound, the goal for The Witcher 3's music was to really go back to the roots of the series, to try to relate to the themes and the character that was so excellently captured by Adam Skorupa and Paweł Blasek on the first game, according to Przybyłowicz. The Witcher 3 still ends up having these grand orchestral moments, but really the folk roots were key. And Przybyłowicz ends up describing it as, it kind of ended up as medieval hard rock or heavy metal, which, if you listen to these eventual clips here, it's like, I get that. Like, it's a different instrument set, obviously, hitting towards the medieval sound, but there's an energy to it there. Overall, for the orchestra, it was performed by the Brandenburg State Orchestra in Germany. So since folk music and Slavic music were inspirations, a band called Percival was a prime reference for the team. And it was a band where they were named after a character from one of the character, like a character from Sapkowski's series. Like, I guess is named Percival, so the band is named after that character. And so this relationship kind of grew into the team at CD Projekt working with Percival on composition and performances for about a dozen songs. Now, Przybyłowicz, really approached this from like an academic background that he was, raised with all that education, right? So he came to the first recording session with Percival with all this sheet music prepared for the band, only to discover that most of the members in the group could not read sheet music. They were more of an improvisational sort of creation, like just very skilled in that way. So, all right, throw it all out and just kind of have a jam session going on. That's how a lot of that music with Percival was implemented. There are a lot of unique instruments on this soundtrack, some of which we've talked about briefly before on past episodes, but ones that stood out as not your usual instruments were the hammered dulcimer, the kemench, the buzyki, the saz, the hurdy-gurdy, the bowed guzli, the yali tanbur, and the gechak. Lots of instruments! It's a unique sound here on The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt's score, and we'll hear examples right here in the 5 critical tracks, and we have to start with The Trail. So this plays in the opening cinematic of the game, which, my goodness, even for a game from 2015, like the ultra settings on a PC, you crank this one up, this game still holds up today. It's a gorgeous looking game, but this one is like a pre-rendered cutscenes, and just the CG animation is amazing. So it's kind of setting up the story where Geralt is on the trail looking for Yennefer of Vengerberg, and she's this sorceress with long black raven hair. This scene is famous for her sending a raven through an eye of a soldier and have it coming out the back of his head. So that's kind of what this one is known for. So great music that plays during this cutscene really gets you into the music. As someone who wanted to go in and play this game, there love interests for The Witcher and all that. The character of Triss Marigold comes back from The Witcher 2, and she's this redhead character. Just gorgeous character, sure, right? But the whole background when I was doing research was like, Yennefer's a big deal in the story. She's like, the fated love interest of Geralt that they could never find, time together, but they really want to. So I'm like, all right, I'm interested. And like this cutscene sold me immediately on Yennefer. I'm like, yep, okay. If we go do that, that's the way. I'm going on that romantic subplot. But yeah, just the strings, the percussion, the vocals, like gets you kind of right in the mood of what the sound for the Witcher 3 score will be. The next track, number 2 on the Critical 5, is Geralt of Rivia. So I guess this is considered to be Geralt's main theme. I would hope so, if it's titled Geralt of Rivia. But most people, and myself included, commonly would know this as the main menu music. So especially when this swell builds and it's this instrument that gets pretty high pitched for the main melody, but like that's a pretty key moment when you're just kind of sitting on that main menu screen and just kind of taking it in, and also when the game's loading. To get back into your play session. So because of that reason, it's probably the song I think of most when it comes to this game. Yeah, just that orchestral swell just really, really does it for me, really encapsulates it.
Is it a bagpipe?
It sounds like a bagpipe. Yeah, it might be. I'm sure it's one of those weird hurdy-gurdy whatever instruments.
It very well. It's not a hurdy-gurdy because weirdly enough, I know what that is. I shouldn't and don't know how, but I do know what a hurdy-gurdy is. But yeah, it sounds like a bagpipe to me personally, but it could very well be that one of the ones on that long list of instruments that I've never heard of.
Very possible, certainly. Number 3 on the Critical 5, Silver for Monsters. This one is composed by Marcin Przybyłowicz and Percival, so this is one that Percival helped with. This is pretty much regular combat music when you're fighting monsters, because there are 2 tracks on the OST that get paired. One's Silver for Monsters, this one, and the other is Steel for humans. So depending on what sword you're using, what enemies you're facing, this one is especially memorable at the beginning of the game because you come across a lot of these kind of basic monsters. A lot of them are called drowners. But this music makes killing them pretty epic. And this vocalization of the la 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 la, it's to the point where I noticed like the YouTube comments for videos for this song, people are like, yeah, I googled Witcher 3 la 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 song and got this one because it's one that really stands out when you're playing the game and you're like, I want to know what this one is. Where you go la 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 la. So that would be this song. It's a pretty important one.
I think on your list, this is probably my favorite of all of them. This song is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's got a good energy to it. I think it was used in one of the trailers, at least for part of it. So it's, again, like, yep, had to have this one. Gotta be here, at least for the leleles alone. Number 4 on the Critical 5, The Fields of Ardskellig. So pretty far in the game, like maybe like the halfway point, I'm guessing, you arrive at the Skellige Isles. And so you're taking a boat to get there for one. You're getting off like the main part of the continent. So you're arriving at these islands and this music comes in as you're kind of exploring the space. And it's totally different than like anything else on this soundtrack. It's just so calm and so gorgeous. Apparently, it borrows the melody of the 19th century Scottish song Fir Abata, which, the first lyrics there that would make sense. But yeah, so like it kind of represents this other part of the world, the Skellige Isles. And yeah, it's just so calming and peaceful and really nice to listen to. I just like it a whole lot. And for the difference of the sound, I think it had to be here.
It's a very, very pretty song.
Mm-hmm. And just when you get singing in songs overall, it helps. It's like piano, jazz, singing. Probably going to help the cases for songs making our lists.
The trifecta. Now, if only we could figure out how to put all 3 of these together.
I don't know. Jazz, piano, sing. There's got to be some game. Maybe in Cuphead's DLC, they'll figure it out whenever that one comes out. Final track on the Critical 5 here. It's a pretty important one for The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Hunt or be hunted. This is another one that is composed by Marcin Przybyłowicz and Percival. I think this is especially notable not only to me and to a lot of people, but in White Orchard, there's the Beast of White Orchard that kind of like caps off that section of the world to kind of give you all these tutorials of kind of how to play this game. And it's a royal griffin. Like the first big boss, the first big monster that you have to track, hunt, trap, take down, battle. This big epic boss battle really early on in the game. And it's this music that plays with it. That plays as part of your hunt and your combat with it. And yeah, it's also really important because I think some people may know it because it was used during Geralt's reveal trailer for Soul Calibur 6. So I don't know if you've heard it there. Maybe you have. It's just an epic song. You're ready to take on the world with your Witcher powers. It's like last on some OST releases, but like it's first in my heart.
It's also very, very good. Epic is probably the way I would describe it. Like, saying that it's a boss fight theme, that makes the most sense. That makes the most sense possible.
Yeah.
And I know I'm basically being repetitive on this, but I need people to understand these, like, listening to this Critical 5 is the first I've ever heard of any of these songs.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a really good soundtrack. I definitely wanted to talk about it, especially with the release on Switch. So I have a couple tracks on the cutting room floor that just didn't make it. The first one being Cloak and Dagger. This is one that is composed by Percival, and I didn't know, going into this research, that this is essentially like the ending cinematic and credit song of this game, which is really interesting because when I was listening to this, and I'm pretty familiar with the soundtrack before, but just as a refresher for this, I'm listening to this and I'm like, this might as well have come from an Assassin's Creed game, especially when you're talking about the Egyptian and Greek games with Origins and Odyssey from the last few years. Like, could have been straight from there. You could have told me otherwise, and I would have believed it, especially with a title like Cloak and Dagger. But yeah, this is a really, really cool sounding one. I liked this one a lot. And then another one that really caught my ear was Blood on the Cobblestones. This is one that is composed by Mikołaj Stryński. So even in LA, he got to do this one. I guess it plays at multiple points in the game, but most people found it especially notable in a fight with Rosa var Artra and the Brosodi brothers. I wish I knew who those were, but if you're a fan of the game and you're like, oh yeah, from there, kudos. Glad it may have struck a bell. But I listened to this one, I'm like, okay, you're living in LA, Stryński. Did you maybe take some inspiration from the Sherlock Holmes movies? Like that, Hans Zimmer's Sherlock Holmes scores? Because, it sure sounds like it, with Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law and all that. And I don't know. It really caught my ear just because it has that kind of energy. But here it is with, The Witcher's instrument sets. But yeah, I'm sure you're hearing this and it's like, that sounds like Sherlock Holmes.
I read the outline before I heard the song, and then oh, that's what he means. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not a bad place to take inspiration, to be perfectly honest. Those movies have really good scores.
Oh yeah. But it just is what it is. I liked it a lot though, so put it there. Well, will I never forget about the game? Yeah, I kind of mentioned it. I got 6 hours in. I really want to continue it, but I just need this big long gap in video game releases, man. And because I got to devote my attention to playing The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. It's what I loved playing it, but it was just waiting for all those patches to hit in that really killed me. Because I have the game on PS4. I bought the Game of the Year edition on PC. Got a good enough PC to crank up those settings. So why haven't I played it? I really should. I would like it a whole lot.
Let's all agree. Here, I'm gonna fix all of this for everyone. Now I know most people in the industry are gonna be like, that's dumb, but hear me out. We take a break from releasing video games for 2 years.
Oh my God.
Because I was gonna say 1 year, but I genuinely don't think that would be enough.
No.
We'll take a break for 2 years. I know everybody wants to talk about silly things like staying in business and making a profit, but then everybody has time to play their backlog.
Yeah, or you just find a way to balance it all because next generation's coming, and
That's
Boy,
silly.
That's going to be exciting.
Let's not talk about unrealistic solutions. Let's go back to mine where an entire industry shuts down for 2 years.
And then never comes back at that point. Jesus. Well, that aside, delaying pleasure, delaying new video game releases. I don't know how that turned out with the sex in The Witcher 3 and Silent Hill 2 is a whole other thing. But yeah, monsters. Lots of monsters. Pyramid Head, Griffins, Downers. I don't know. There are some themes there. It's a weird one this week. We never plan these things out in advance. It's like, what are the games we want to talk about, whether it's releases or what we just want to bring to the table?
And then we're just like, how do we cobble together with tape and string a theme between these two games? I think there's one time we planned the theme ahead of time, and that was the Mario 64 Sonic Adventure 2 episode. We were like, well, if we're going to talk about Mario, we'll talk about Sonic too.
Or Leighton Attorney.
Leighton and Ace Attorney.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Those are the two single times we have ever planned these themes out ahead of time. And sometimes we get lucky, and sometimes it's The Witcher 3 and Silent Hill 2.
So if they sound cobbled together, that's probably why. But great games nonetheless, great soundtracks. Hope you enjoyed listening. That will do it for us this week on Original Soundchat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakeasy. Joe is over at The Dobaga. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but that's honestly, you can watch that. You can listen to it, have it on your TV, but it's the MP3 podcast version that you're really going to want because you want to take that with you in your car, on a run, listen at work. We won't tell your boss you're listening to conversations about great video game OSTs. I mean, that's the best way to listen to it. Really enjoy that music. You can interact with us on social media at Soundchat OST for feedback on how we're doing with these episodes and suggestions on what you'd like us to play. There's also that Spotify playlist that is building and building.
Yeah, at time of recording, there are 310 tracks with 17 hours of music on it.
My goodness. And that's just the songs that are available on Spotify. Like Nintendo, notoriously bad for not getting that there. So certainly, what about this week's songs? Anything there?
Sadly, Silent Hill is not.
Oh.
But Witcher 3, surprisingly, is.
Excellent. Good on CD Projekt Red. Good for them. We also have bonus tracks that we are working on. Like we said, this week has been hell. It's been crazy. So we'll get you a new interview with a game composer soon. Got it all recorded. Just gotta stitch it all together. And then we'll talk about this other show sometime. I promise it's a cool idea. We're really excited about it. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
Next week, I will be talking about Andrew Rorman.
I will be talking about Stephen Barton. Good games there. Really important to talk about, whether it's with releases or more spooky times. So to play us out, I'd like to talk about a song called Sword of Destiny. And it's a Witcher montage medley song, but it's done on YouTube by Jillian Aversa, featuring Kate Covington. So, yeah, get some more lelele's going on in there, and hope you enjoy that. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Sound Chat. We'll see you next time. Take care.